Welcome to Shift Church. If this is your first time here, we would love it if you would scan this QR code, and if you fill out that Connects card, we'll send you some free Opus coffee. And make sure that you check out the Coffee with Joe option so that you can enjoy that cup of Joe with Joe. And you can ask any and all questions that you want or need to know. It would be a great time. It's official. Shift students are meeting at Defy on July 22nd at 2 p.m. The cost is $20 per person to jump. Anyone middle to high school can come and jump and hang out. If you're older than that, sorry, you don't get to have any fun. You can register on our Facebook virtual campus group. The First Magnitude group is meeting this Friday, the 19th at 6 p.m. Come hang out, watch the games, get some food from their food trucks. It's always a fun time meeting some new people. You know it is, making all those new friends, having fun. You can register on our Facebook virtual campus group or just show up. 1946, the movie, has hit the road on tour through the southern United States, and they're gonna be in Jacksonville on August 14th. Tickets are free, but donations are always welcome. Not only are you going to be able to watch the film in person, but there's going to be a Q&A afterwards with film creator Sharon, Rocky, Ruggio, and others. If you'd like to attend, then you can scan this code or the one in the back, scroll down, and reserve your tickets. It's that easy. And now it's time for week 2 of our new series, American Jesus.
Glad to see you here. We have a lot of people traveling. My daughter's one of them, traveling back from St. Louis right now. So glad to see everybody here in person and also online. If this is your first time, especially online, my name is Joe. I'm the lead pastor here. We've been in a series that we've called American Jesus. But before we move into that, we need to make sure that everyone knows that as a faith community that we loudly and unequivocally condemn the apparent attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. And I think most people know me well and know me well enough to know that I have been never Trump since 2014, 2015. I have grave concerns about his policies and even more so about his character. However, this path is not one that leads to life. This is what we talked about last week. This path leads nowhere but destruction. So we have to figure out a better way forward because we cannot continue this way. The rhetoric and political violence cannot continue to spiral out of control. The way of Jesus is never one of violence. It is one of uncontrolling love that subverts the egotistical myth narrative of redemptive violence. So this morning, let's take a moment and just breathe. We're going to take a few moments to center ourselves and to just be. Each week, we gather with a moment of centering and reflection. So I'm going to ask if you're comfortable to close your eyes and take a few deep cleansing breaths. In through the nose and then out through the mouth. Allowing your body to relax and to just lay down all of the things that you carried in here. And if whatever's coming next tries to intrude, just gently push it aside and allow it to stay where it needs to be next. Focus on right here. Be present. What do you need from this gathering today? What do you need from me? Set your intentions for this time together. Continue that deep breathing, and as you do, notice how you're feeling. Be aware of what your body says and how it responds during this time together. And I will also say, when those feelings come up, meet them with curiosity and grace rather than judgment. I invite you to take a few more deep breaths and then begin to come back to the room. Last week, my son came to me out of nowhere and said, let's watch the Star Wars movies. I have been trying to get him to watch those almost the entirety of his 15 years of existence. So we started with episode 1. We're going in chronological order. He knows all the surprises. So we're going in chronological order. And after we watched episode 1, he looked over at me and he said, do they get better? Because that was really boring. A small tear of joy rolled down my cheek, and I looked at him and said, yes, son, they do get better. This is the worst one. This movie should be considered trash. So just throw it away, brother. We kept going. We watched episode 2, and then we watched episode 3, which is easily the best of the prequels. And now we're heading into Solo, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Andor, and then my favorite Star Wars movie, Rogue One. I love how Rogue One is incredibly gritty and raw and real. And it's the first time in the Star Wars universe that we really saw just how evil the Empire truly is. And there's this scene towards the end of the movie where our heroine, Jen Erso, is standing around and they're all debating on what they should do. And she kind of gives this speech. And in that speech, she says, rebellions are built on hope. And if you've seen the movie, you know that they kind of ignore her, right? That all hope really does seem lost until Jen, with a small band of her ragtag people, take a spaceship. Couldn't think of what it was called. Take a spaceship and they sneak onto, the planet Scarif to steal the plans for the Death Stars or the Death Star. And you know that doing so cost them their lives. But it allowed the rebellion to access the plans for the Death Star and eventually destroy it. And I love that movie so much. Like that willingness to not despair in the face of overwhelming odds, the guts and determination to not be overcome by evil, and to the point of laying down their lives for people they would never meet. They would never see the day the Empire fell. They were planting trees whose shade they would never enjoy, all for hope. Now, Rogue One is just a movie, right? A great one, but it's just a movie. But stories like that tap into something deep within us. They tap into that divine spark that we all carry. They speak to the good, or to the idea that good will ultimately triumph over evil, that no matter how unfair the system is, it will eventually be judged as such. That regardless of how dark and desperate the world may feel, there's always hope. And right now, I can't think of anything more than we can use in our lives than a little bit of hope. Growing up, I grew up in something called the Free Will Baptist Church. And if you know what the Free Will Baptist Church is, I'm sorry. It was, and probably still is, incredibly fundamentalist. I have been asked what my church growing up was like. If you've ever seen the movie Footloose, it's the preacher that tries to stop dancing. That's my home church, okay? In that church, we talked often. We talked a lot about the hope of Jesus. And I can tell you from experience that when we talked about that hope, it never felt hopeful because it was always tied to fear and punishment, specifically fear of the world, like everybody outside the four walls of that building, and then punishment of hell, right? The world is going to try to drag you to hell. They are out to get you. They want to see you fail.
And the demons.
And the demons. And it just grows worse. Like now, Be careful of the rhetoric that's already coming out of MAGA camps and Christian nationalist churches today. The fear being preached from pulpits across this country is poison. And as a kid and teenager, again, kind of experiencing that growing up, the hope of Jesus didn't inspire much hope in me. The only thing it really inspired was anxiety. Anxiety over the rapture, anxiety over making sure that all my sins were forgiven, anxiety about all of the people that were dying and burning in hell. I've mentioned this before, but that anxiety was so deep within me that I developed a compulsion centered around a specific prayer that I had to pray every night before I could go to sleep. My body would not physically go to sleep unless I said this prayer, and that lasted into my 30s. And what bothers me the most about this kind of thinking and theology, other than the real harm it creates in people, is that the hope peddled by the church is the solution to a problem the church created. Like if a person or an organization offers the answer to a problem it creates, that's called manipulation. And that's the way of American Jesus. American Jesus offers a solution to a problem that he created. If I tell you that an all-powerful God is going to send you to hell because of a system that he created, and unless you do the steps outlined in a specific book that I will then interpret for you because I'm the man of God, I can manipulate you into almost anything. What American Jesus actually does is peddle fear wrapped in hope. It's just a Trojan horse. And they'll use verses like this, John 15, verse 18. If the world hates you, be aware that it hated me before it hated you. And American Jesus will say, see, I told you that the world would hate you for following me. Don't go out there where they hate you. Stay in here where you're loved. This is where you will find hope. American Jesus and the pastors who follow him will take verses like that, twist it just enough to fit their agenda while still sounding like truth. American Jesus is why you are hearing extremist pastors coming out and saying the most atrocious things from church stages. In June, late June, we saw far-right pastor Joel Webbin. If you don't know who that is, do not look him up. He was at the Building Christian Boroughs conference organized by, listen to this, the New Christendom Press, which sounds amazing. He complained from stage, he was complaining about the diversity of ethnicity and religion in his neighborhood, of the people that he would meet as he was walking through the neighborhood, just how traumatizing it was to explain to his little girl why that person is in full religious garb, and how thankful he is when they come across a white family with multiple kids, because at the end of the day, when things get rough, he doubts that Hindu family will fight for his children. Or there's Mark Robinson, the GOP candidate for North Carolina governor, recently said from a church stage, some folks need killing. It's a matter of necessity. He went on to say, they're watching us, they're listening to us, they're tracking us, they get mad at you, they cancel you, they dox you, they kick you off social media, they come in and close your business. And he said these things to the applause of the members from Lake Church in White Lake, North Carolina, who should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. And after that violent, rambling rant, Robinson was defended by the church's pastor. His name is Cameron McGill, who said, without a doubt, those he deemed worthy of death were seeking to kill us. And then, last night, a 20-year-old kid was shot and killed by Secret Service as the alleged shooter of President Trump. Rhetorical violence leading to political violence, leading to physical violence. That is the hope peddled by American Jesus. But let's just take a moment to slow down and do some critical thinking. Let's take the emotion out of it for just a moment. Because we've talked about this before, this idea of the world hating us, right? And in this context, that word world is not how the church uses it today. Jesus isn't talking about non-Christians. Number one, there was no such thing. But he's not talking about them. The Greek word is the word cosmos. He's talking about the arrangement or the structure of our world system. He's talking about how we order our world and the violence inherent in that order. He's talking about the people and the powers that order our world the way that it is. And who would that have been in Jesus's day? It would have been the Roman Empire and the temple system. It would have been the government and the nationalist religion of first century Israel. It was the authoritarian ruling elites and the religious leaders that conspired with them. That's who hated Jesus. All you gotta do is read. It wasn't the normal everyday people. It wasn't the people outside of the temple. They loved it. They loved being around him. They threw parties, huge parties, and invited him to be a part. They always wanted to be around him. The religious elites hated Jesus. The ruling class hated Jesus because he threatened their power, he threatened their status, and he threatened their money. One of the greatest gaslights in all of human history is how the American church took a brown-skinned Palestinian Messiah that was executed by religious leaders in bed with authoritarian politicians and turned that same brown-skinned Palestinian Messiah into a mascot for religious leaders in bed with authoritarian politicians. And the gaslighting is going to get worse in the coming days and weeks. And I fear that last night's assassination attempt will do nothing but further entrench the MAGA cult of personality and those who would respond to that cult of personality with hatred, like we saw yesterday. Now, last week we looked at John's account of Jesus's life, where Jesus used agriculture and talked about vines and branches as a way, as a metaphor, as a way to describe this eternal presence that is always within us and around us. And in the following chapter, chapter 16, Jesus is talking to his disciples and he's telling them about that end is coming, like his end is coming. And they don't quite understand. Maybe it wasn't that they refused, maybe they just couldn't hear it. Because he's telling them that he's going to die and that they're going to abandon him. It's a very doom and gloom kind of chapter. And yet at the end of it, he ends with this in John 16:33. I'll wait for it for you. I have said this to you so that in me you may have peace. In the world you face persecution, but take courage, I have conquered the world. Now, can we go back to Star Wars for just a second? One of the things that I love so much about that movie, Rogue One, is that everybody who landed on that planet, Scarif, was willing to sacrifice everything, right? The rebels on that planet knew, that went to that planet, knew that there was a good chance they weren't making it out. And they did it anyway. Why? Other than it was written in the script. Because hope isn't just optimism that things are going to get better. Hope demands we make it better for everyone. Listen to what Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann said in his book, A Gospel of Hope. Go and check. Yep. Hope and gospel faith is not just a vague feeling that things will work out, for it is evident that things will not just work out. Rather, hope is the conviction against a great deal of data that God is tenacious and persistent in overcoming the deathliness of the world, that God intends joy and peace. Christians find compelling evidence in the story of Jesus, that Jesus, with great persistence and great vulnerability, everywhere he went, turned the enmity of society toward a new possibility, turned the sadness of the world toward joy, introduced a new regime where the dead are raised, the lost are found, and the displaced are brought home again. Last week, I had a really good conversation with a man by the name of Jason DeShoza. Can you show that picture? That is Jason and his alter ego, Mama Ashley Rose. Jason leads the Rose Dynasty Foundation here in Florida. It's a non-for-profit that creates safe spaces for all LGBTQ kids, including all of those on the autism spectrum. And I reached out to him because Tori and I saw him on CNN's The Rest of the Story, I think it was called, Anderson Cooper, and they did a thing on the laws here in the state of Florida, and they interviewed Jason, and I was like, that dude's literally like over there in Ocala. So I hollered at him about being part of the Shift Happens podcast. And afterward, we were just talking about some of the stuff that they do, and he'd asked if maybe the Pride Center might be willing to throw some volunteer help their way. They need some help. They had somebody fall through with loading and unloading some stuff, and it's like 20-25 minutes from here. And for their loading some equipment for their summer camp called Camp Out. And it's literally just a summer camp for queer students so they can experience all the fun without the worry of harm. And isn't that just a horribly sad statement? Having to create separate events for kids so they can feel safe and have fun. But isn't that the history of our country? And during that conversation, he asked me not to make sure not to reveal the location of the camp. And I don't know why, but that one really stopped me in my tracks. Listen, as on the Pride Board, we do all kinds of events and we plan all kinds of stuff. And several of the events, we have to make sure that there's not any address publicized. Like if you're going to be part of this, we'll contact you afterwards, or the people that are part of this know where to go because of safety concerns. So I'm part of, and I don't know why, but that one was like this real gut punch that we can't publish where it's at. A summer camp for kids out of fear of being harmed. And Jason and his staff know that any day they could, at any moment, could be hurt, and they do it anyway. Why? Hope. Things aren't just going to get better. God isn't just going to magically show up and make things all peachy keen. If God is, then God is love. And if God is love, then God is uncontrolling. I don't believe it's in God's nature to dictate anything. I do believe that God partners with humanity, that spirit of love partners with us to squeeze every ounce of good from any situation that is possible. And that means that if God exists, then he moves through people, right? And if God moves through people, then what we do matters. Which is why Jason and his staff are willing to put themselves on the line for the least of these. We must decide to walk that narrow gate path that leads to life for everybody. And I do mean everybody, not just the ones that look like mine. We must choose to love our neighbors as ourselves, all of our neighbors, not just straight white Christian ones, but our Muslim neighbor, our trans neighbor, our Palestinian or Israeli neighbor, and yes, even our MAGA Christian nationalist neighbors. And this is what Jesus means when he says, take heart, take courage. It's hope. Because he's overcome the systems of the world, not with the same kind of power that our empires peddle in. In the life of Jesus, we see a path that subverts the powers and principalities. It upends the structures, the agenda, the systems of those who support the status quo. And this is why those on the outside have always been labeled heretical, because they threaten the nice, neat little religion built around Jesus. Hope is that long-suffering readiness to live without resolution. We most likely will never see the result of the hope planted within us. And yet we toil and strive for it anyway. We do this because we recognize that our hope comes from a deeper well than the system offers. Our contentment, our peace that Jesus refers to comes from a source beyond ourselves. Because of this, we push forward knowing that we too are planting trees that most likely we will never enjoy the shade of. Now, hope doesn't come without a cost, doesn't come without consequences. The system murdered love because of hope. But in doing so, it also undermined its own agenda and helped create the archetype that we see over and over and over throughout history that overcomes the world systems through the Christ. Joan of Arc, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Emily Davison, Medgar Evers, Isla Weber, George W. Lee, Marsha P. Johnson, Malcolm X, Dr. King. That list could go on and on and on. People throughout history with the audacious hope that drives them to challenge the evils of the systems they were born into. If God is, then we will find her among those that dare to hope. And that's great, right? Those stories are amazing. And they motivate us toward the betterment of all people. But how? Like, how do we tap into that hope? How do we tap into that deeper well, into that source beyond ourselves? So let me finish with this. 4 simple ways. I did it last week too. I didn't mean for it to happen today, but it is. It's not always going to be this way. So just enjoy it while you got it. But 4 things that I think can help all of us sustain hope in this dark season. But before I do, I need you to know that this is not a magic formula. right? This isn't something that you can just do it will automatically bring hope. These are guides. They're helpful, all right? Over time, some of these may not work at all for you. And over time, they may radically change or just alter slightly, right? There's no magic pill that you can swallow and then just be hopeful all the time. That being said, number one, embrace contemplative practices. Regular meditation, prayer, silent retreats help deepen that connection with the divine. This is an example that has been set for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years by Christian mystics. These practices foster an inner peace and a sustained sense of hope. I use this book. I've said it before. I use this book of Celtic benedictions to help me. Or use your own book, right? Find one for yourself. If you need some help, I'll suggest some. Or find somebody, ask somebody here, like Kane. Did you know that Kane leads guided meditations every Saturday at the Sacred Earth Center? Tor and I have been. Talk to Kane. He'll help you get started. Learn from the ancients and from those around you that practice the contemplative arts. Number two, cultivate community. Build and nurture relationships within a supportive faith community or just community. Because you can share struggles, right? You can share experiences, joy, celebrations, and those things will reinforce a collective sense of hope and provide encouragement in those moments that you need it. Places like Shift, this is where places like us come in helpful, right? Get plugged in with a group of people. Like if you don't have one, we have our first magnitude group this Friday. Start there. Also, and this is worth noting, do not let Shift be your only place of community. This cannot be the end all be all. This cannot be it for you. All right. It can be a place, it can be a part, but hear me, please. It cannot be your only community. Number three, practice gratitude and mindfulness. Focus on the present moment and recognize the blessings in your life, right? Keeping a gratitude journal, practicing gratitude, regularly reflecting on why you're thankful can help maintain that hopeful outlook. My wife, for years, has done a rose and thorn around the dinner table with our kids. Name one good thing and one bad thing. Like what was their thorn? What was the rose? And this isn't toxic positivity, because hope recognizes the hardships and the struggles. Hope sees the world truthfully. But if all you look for in your life is the bad, that's all you're going to find. Last, number four, seek social justice and compassionate action. Engage in acts and advocate for social justice. Like if you're living out your faith through compassionate action, that's going to sustain hope because you're able to witness the positive impacts of your efforts in the world around you. It cannot just be me standing up here talking about this, right? You have to put your hands and feet to it. And you can do it through us, right? Life is busy. It's busy enough without having to try and find like service projects for yourself, but it doesn't have to be through us. Maybe you're interested in working with, let's just say, the migrant population. Well, guess what? Let me connect you with our local Human Rights Coalition, whose office is right there. Whatever it is, find an outlet for it. And if you need help, just holler. So obviously, I had to rewrite part of this talk. And I have been awake since roughly 3:30 this morning. I am running on caffeine and adrenaline. I woke up and I just couldn't go back to sleep. Although I do foresee a nap in my future, but I just couldn't go back to sleep. My brain just turned on and I started thinking about everything that's going on. And there's just a deep ache in my chest, in the pit of my stomach. And it's the same ache I had as I watched the horrors of January 6th. It's the same kind of ache for those of you that may be a little bit older, watching those planes hit those towers. It's the same ache. The upheaval, the confusion, the violence, those things that are baked into the system. And they just continue to rear its ugly head over and over. And I think about that list of people that I mentioned earlier. And I wonder, did they know? Did they know that they were living out history? Did they know that one day that their story would inspire action and hope? I'm sure some of them did, right? Like Malcolm X, Dr. King, standing out in front of all of these people, seeing all these faces, knowing that they were part of something bigger. But they all couldn't have, not all of them. I mean, just imagine how Dietrich Bonhoeffer felt standing in front of a loaded Nazi gun, right? Did he know? Or Marsha P. Johnson, who led the riots in New York City for queer rights. Do you think that she knew or how she felt standing in front of, protesting in front of crooked New York City police officers? What I do know is that they persevered. They kept going. In the face of insurmountable odds, they continued. Why? Hope. Hope whose source is from deep within, but fed from a far greater spring. Hope invigorates and nourishes. Hope shocks the senses and narrows the focus. Hope pushes us to bring heaven to earth. Hope helps us build bigger tables instead of bigger walls. You know, Jen Erso from Rogue One, keep up. She was right. All rebellions are built on hope. And hope brings healing. But we'll talk more about that next week. John 16:33. I have said this to you so that in me you may have peace. In the world you will face persecution, but take courage. I've conquered the world. If you're new, we end each week with a time of reflection. And we do that to allow you time to listen to your body and to listen to the Spirit. And so here in a moment, our little band will lead in a final song. But Alan will play some music, just a pad, just to have create some intimacy so it's not an awkward silence. Lights will be turned down. And I'll ask a few questions to guide that process, and then I'll pray. And we'll have a time for any that are willing to take communion, which are the little cups in your seats. And each week we reflect on what we've heard and thought about and learned. And today, let it remind us of the hope that Jesus brings, that he lived out. Hope that is found not in the systems of our world, but in a subversive path of love and the cross of the Christ. And just like we began our gathering, if you're comfortable, close your eyes and take a few deep cleansing breaths and just feel. What was it that you needed from me today, from this gathering? What was your intention? Did it come to you? And if so, what's it saying? If it didn't, why? And what is that saying? Why do you think so many people fall for American Jesus's false hope? What does that say about us as a people? Where do you fall for American Jesus? Which of the 4 ways to help sustain hope resonated with you the most? And how can you implement that today? And my final question is this, and more of a challenge, really. Do you commit to living out that eternal hope? And if so, how will you do that day to day? We don't do this often, but I know how hard it is to reconstruct God and love and following Jesus. There are so many things to untangle, and even though we may want to commit to this way of love, sometimes things like praying or baptism or church or all of this can still feel off. But we've had some people asking recently about what all of that means. And if that's you, then if you want to choose that way of living out that path of Jesus, then just see me after, or you can call or text me or message me. I would love to buy you a cup of coffee and sit and talk about it in person or Zoom. Let's pray. Spring of eternal hope, thank you for your peace. Right now, let us rest in it, recharge in it. I pray that we all take time to rest in that peace before we start our days. Help us to focus on love and then to live it. Give us strength to persevere even when all seems lost. Help us to tap into that Jesus energy that keeps love moving forward. And may we commit to seeing you in every person we meet, even and especially those we disagree with. Do not allow our hearts to harden. Instead, I pray that they're broken for the people still trapped in the old systems of fear. And thank you that we have been freed to love and free to be loved. I pray for the state of our union. The roots of our country have been fed with the blood of so many, and I fear we continue to reap what we've sown. Lord, have mercy on us all. I pray against the physical violence we witnessed last night. I pray against the rhetorical violence of the past election cycles, and I pray against the political violence being forced in this country. May we look for opportunities to choose the narrow way and give us the strength to walk it well. Forgive us for the things done and for things left undone. Give us eyes to see and ears to hear. Bring comfort to the afflicted, healing to the broken, and freedom to the chained. In Christ's name, amen.